Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's IPMA webinar sponsored by Ricoh, the sustainability of print and paper, myths versus facts. We're very happy to have everyone here today. I would like to introduce to you Kenneth Tucker, Ricoh U.S. Strategic Channel Marketing Manager for Implants. The Ricoh vision is to elevate today's image and expectations industry-wide. Ken has led the initiatives in these production printing industry since 1985, and we are so happy to have Ken with us today, and always Ricoh, such a great friend of ours. Welcome, Ken, and thank you.
Thank you, John. I just want to take a minute to be able to express our sincere gratitude to the IPMA for allowing us to be here and again present another thoughtful and exciting webinar that looks at ways in which the implant operations are excelling in today's marketplace. Of course, the world is changing dramatically with changes in technology and changes in processes that are coming together. And the one thing that I found as I visit a number of sites across the U.S. is that we really are in a debate. And I view this particular topic as one of those debates in that as leadership within our corporations that we work for, have different vendors coming in with their own thoughts and stories about why their product should be utilized, or why you should send work off-site and close your center, or why you should use a managed services company to run your business. Those are all just separate debates, and whoever has the most information and can articulate that information best is the winner. They all can be very, very valid in their own ways. And the nice thing about getting the facts, being able to debunk the myths about print, is that it really puts forward that debate. So we'll be able to look at both sides of that story, and you'll be able to have more information, more ammunition to be able to think about things you'll be able to present to your organizations in the future. Let's go to the next slide. Jen? Thank you. This presentation was actually developed originally through information that we had contracted with NAPCO to be able to generate a white paper on separating myths from the facts. And NAPCO did a phenomenal job in getting all of the thought leaders across the country that really think about these kind of activities and think about what's happening in the world of paper going to print and that exchange of information. And one thing that they found, and probably the most notable statement, is simply that consumers are far more likely to be able to notice, open, read, enjoy, and really engage with paper rather than digital information. And it's because they feel as though it's less intrusive, that it actually provides more memorable information as they feel, touch, look at that particular document. And overall, consensus showed that it is the best way to be able to make them feel valued. And so all those things are very, very important. This is a great document, by the way, and my commitment to you is we will go ahead and send this white paper out to all of those that are on the call, and we'll be able to make sure that you can enjoy and learn new things along the way too. But more importantly, I'd like to switch this on over to one of the leaders that participated in the development of this white paper and provided a lot of information, and that would be Phil Rebell, which is of Two Sides within North America. Let's go to the next slide and introduce Phil. Phil, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, Jennifer. Also, thanks to Ricoh and the IPMA for inviting me to give this webinar. So, as Ken mentioned, I run an organization called Two Sides North America, and today I'll be talking about myths versus facts around the topic of sustainability of print and paper. Next. Let me just start with a little bit of background on who Two Sides is and what we do. We're a global nonprofit, and we're operating currently in over 5 countries and all 5 continents. We have 2 key elements to our mission. One is to promote the sustainability of the graphic communications industry, and 2 is to dispel common environmental misconceptions about print and paper. Our funding comes from print, paper, mail, and packaging sectors with over 600 members globally and 160 companies who are members in North America. Next. Over the years, Two Sides has developed a lot of content and materials which can be accessed on our website. Our goal is to provide credible facts and to centralize the available information that helps our members in the value chain promote the sustainable aspects of print, paper, and paper-based packaging. So I invite you to browse the website and follow us on social media. Next. Globally, Two Sides is also known for what we call our anti-greenwash campaign. This is an ongoing initiative where we work with many different organizations, including many of the Fortune 500 corporations, to discourage the use of misleading environmental claims about print and paper. I'm talking about claims like Go Green, Go Paperless, Save Trees, that are often used to promote lower cost digital services over paper-based communications. The campaign's been very successful to date, with over 450 companies globally now having removed or changed their claims due to our work with them. In North America, the total is now at 127 companies, and our success rate is at 65%. What this means is that every day consumers see millions less negative claims about print and paper. If you see claims that concern you, you can email them to us at the email shown here. Next. Before we get into the main subject of our webinar, I just want to share some results from a U.S. consumer survey done last year on environmental topics related to print and paper. The blue shading on the graph shows the number of consumers who agree with the question. For example, do you believe only recycled paper should be used? That's column 3 there. One of the conclusions of the study was that there's still much public education needed on the topic of sustainable forestry, the state of our forests, the environmental impact of going digital, as well as recycling and how to best use recycled fiber. So our surveys are useful in that they generate areas where we see that public education is needed, but they also give us very positive information that can be used to help promote print and paper, and many of our members and followers are using those survey results. Next. So in the next several slides, I'll be showing a lot of facts, figures, and statistics. And they're all backed up with sources and references. And if you need any of these backup sources, I can provide them. All you need to do is contact me and either one of those emails, and we'll get you the information. Sorry, the email at the bottom. Or you can go to the website that has a lot of this material as well. So before we go, or as we go into our new, or our first myth, the myth of going paperless saves forest, I did have a quiz question, and Jen, I believe you're going to put that up. That's the next slide. Right, so now it's up to you folks to answer the question, what are the key causes of deforestation in North America? And you'll get the answer as we continue into the presentation. So I'll just give you a little time to answer this. All right. I'm assuming that most people have answered it, so we perhaps can go to the next slide, unless, Jen, you want to leave it up there for a few more seconds. I'll let you decide.
They're still answering, so.
Okay.
We'll just. All right. Yeah, it looks like it. Oh, no, boy. All right.
All right, I think we can move on to the next slide.
Just in case you want, 2% answered forestry, 14% urban development, 4% agriculture, 8% other, 73%. I think hit it on the nose. All except number 1.
Yeah, number 5 is the correct answer, and we'll provide, the backup for that over the next few slides, and hopefully that'll become clear. So, one of the things Two Sides does is we have this myths and facts series, and so the fact related to the first myth I showed is that in North America we actually grow many more trees than we harvest. The U.S. and Canada are among the global leaders in sustainable forest management. And for this reason, we have laws and regulations around forestry operations that protect forests as a renewable resource, and that ensures continuous replenishment using good forestry practices, so replanting and silviculture, for example. Also, more than half the certified forests globally are in North America. When I say certified forests, I mean third-party certified to standards like the Forest Stewardship Council and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. In fact, avoiding the use of wood is not necessarily the way to protect forests for the long term. In actual fact, conservation of forests and responsible forest management are the best way. And the areas of the world that consume the least wood are actually the ones that experience the greatest amount of forest loss. And we'll show you some of that on the next slide. This is a global map of where deforestation occurs globally. Red means high levels of forest loss, and dark green means forests are expanding and growing. Light green means forests are stable to growing, as in North America. This map shows a change between 2005 and 2010, but things have not changed much in the past 10 years. Between 1990 and 2015, U.S. forest area actually expanded by about 2.6%, which is equivalent to an average growth rate of 1,660 NFL football fields per day. So the net forest in the U.S., or the net area of forest, is growing. Deforestation is primarily occurring in the southern hemisphere, and this is due to forest conversion, due to agriculture, and in many underdeveloped countries, domestic fuel requirements. Next slide. There's quite a bit of confusion in how the public uses the word deforestation. It's often used in the wrong way to describe forestry operations. In other words, deforestation is the conversion of forest to another land use. One of the photos I have on the right here is a blueberry operation where the primary forest was actually completely removed. It's a form of agriculture, in other words. And that forest will not be reinstated. In other words, they're going to grow blueberries there. Deforestation means a long-term or permanent loss of forest cover. So it includes areas converted to agriculture, pasture, water reservoirs, urban areas. I just threw in a map of the U.S. It's a partial map, but it shows areas that are losing forests. And when you look closely at where those areas are, they are around major urban centers. Florida is actually one of the areas in the U.S. that's losing the most forest. And I just got back from there last week, so I can tell you it's very visible. There is a ton of urban development happening, and that's causing a huge loss of forest habitat. The United Nations actually defines deforestation, and the definition excludes areas where trees have been removed as a result of harvesting or logging, and where the forest is expected to regenerate naturally or with the aid of silviculture. So if you apply sustainable forest management practices to land, it's not actually called deforestation because you're maintaining the forest for the long term. So that's just a bit of definition around that word. Next slide. We also need to recognize all the individuals and companies who are making efforts to manage forests responsibly. Of the wood used to make paper in the United States, about 60% comes from family-owned forests. In fact, more than half the forest land in the U.S. is owned and managed by about 11 million private forest owners. That's 56% of U.S. forest land. And the income that these landowners receive for trees grown on their land encourages them to maintain, manage responsibly, and renew the forest resource. in many cases, when there's no incentive, the land is sold, and it's often sold to developers or other non-forest uses, and that means it's eventually lost for the long term. On privately owned timberlands in the U.S., wood inventories actually increased 6.2% between 2008 and 2014, and forest growth exceeded harvest removals. Next slide. Several years ago, we wrote a white paper, and it was titled, "Contrary to Popular Thinking, Going Paperless Does Not Save Trees." And we have many points, including the one I just made around incentives and landowners managing their land to provide forest products. The other points are that, number one, a lot of the pulp and paper in North America is made using sawmill chips. In other words, most whole trees are used to make lumber, and it's the byproduct from the sawmills, the chips, that go into pulping and paper making. So most whole trees are used to make lumber. The other aspect we found is that even if local paper mills shut down due to market conditions, the local forest resource was often used by other markets such as pellets and lumber. So the fact is, it's a valuable renewable resource, and the key really is to ensure we manage our forests responsibly and always get better at doing this. Next slide. And our survey done last year, again, kind of showed that consumers relate to this idea of sustainable forestry. 70% believe it's important to use paper products from sustainably managed forests. And we also asked questions around the certification labels, and they surprised me, actually. I didn't think they would be this high. But a quarter of the population is aware of the SFI label and the FSC label, and even more pay attention to the labels when purchasing paper. So I guess if you're a producer of print and paper products, it's important to notice that consumer awareness is probably growing in this area as well. Next slide. Our next myth is just that general paper is bad for the environment, and we can go to the next slide as well, Jen. Our fact is that paper is one of the few truly sustainable products. And we say this because when you look at the sustainable features of print and paper, they are actually one of the more sustainable products that surround us. They're made from renewable wood fibers that can be grown, sourced, and reused in a responsible way. Paper is one of the most recycled materials, and the recycling rate now, or the recovery rate, is 68% in the U.S. And using recycled fibers and wood fibers from certified forests can reduce the paper's ecological footprint. And many producers now adhere to these forest certification standards, such as FSC, SFI, and there's PEFC. There's a whole bunch, but the two big ones in North America are FSC and SFI. Next slide. We find that the consumer surveys often give us a unique perspective, very different than what corporations say related to print and paper. This survey is a bit outdated, but it showed us that the majority of consumers see paper as a sustainable way to communicate, as long as it's used responsibly, recycled, and sourced from responsibly managed forests. So we often get a lot of negative in the marketplace around stopping, using less paper, going green, saving trees, that sort of thing. But when we get the results from these consumer surveys, we get a very different message from consumers. In fact, a lot of consumers still have a high preference for print and paper, and I'll be showing some of those results as well. Next slide. Last year's survey also showed some interesting news related to how people rank products. So when we asked consumers to rank products and materials in terms of their environmental friendliness, paper ranked second behind wood, and plastics and electronics ranked last, or 7th and 8th. So in other words, people see paper and forest products as a natural, renewable, recyclable, and environmentally friendly compared to a lot of the other materials that are around us. Next slide. So on this same topic, let's look at the myth that electronic communication is always more environmentally friendly than paper-based communications. I guess, in my opinion, many of us are so engaged with our useful electronic devices that we don't think much about their life cycle and how they're made. The fact is they have a significant and growing environmental impact on our planet. We now have a very large and growing digital infrastructure that uses many non-renewable natural resources that are extracted and processed. And they require, or the infrastructure requires, a growing amount of energy to run web server farms and data centers. Electronic waste is now the fastest growing waste stream, with making up 70% of toxic waste in U.S. landfills. And the average electronic product now contains more than 60 different materials, in many cases rare metals, that have a finite supply. In other words, they're non-renewable. The carbon footprint of the electronic sector is also growing rapidly, and at this point is much larger globally than the print and paper carbon footprint. By 2040, it's estimated that the greenhouse gas emissions from the ICT sector will be more than half of the global transportation sector. And something as benign as an email, when totaled to a global scale annually, can have huge impacts and be equivalent to the CO2 emissions of 850 million cars. So, you know, the individual emails we send may not come across as having a huge impact, but it's just that this sector is growing so rapidly and developing so rapidly that there's a lot of requirements for resources. Next slide. Dealing with electronic waste is a huge challenge for many countries. The recycling rates right now are about 20%, compared to almost 70% for print and paper-based products. And the way in which some of these electronics are disposed, in many cases in developing countries, is causing health and environmental issues. Next slide. So our next myth is paper production is a major cause of global greenhouse gas emissions, and it's time for our next quiz. Jen? So when I say the global greenhouse gas inventory, that's basically all the CO2 and greenhouse gases that contribute to that inventory, which is one of the main reasons for global climate change. So if you want to take a shot at this, yes?
Yes, we have a technical problem with this poll. It shut itself off before everybody got to ask, so sorry.
No problem. All right, so we'll skip over this one. Next slide. The answer will be forthcoming. So there's actually a great story behind sustainable forest management, wood and forest products when it comes to climate change. Growing and sustainably managing forests takes up much carbon, and it's a key solution to mitigating the environmental impacts of climate change. As they grow, trees take up and absorb CO2, release oxygen that's much needed by every living thing on the planet. So the better we take care of our planets and ensure that they're here for the long term, the better it is for our environment. Also, not on this slide is the fact that about 65% of the energy currently used by the U.S. pulp and paper industry, and this is a statistic from AF&PA member companies, comes from renewable resources. In fact, the pulp and paper industry is one of the highest users of renewable energy due to its ability, or the ability of the mills, to use wood biomass as a source of energy. The greenhouse gas emissions from the U.S. pulp and paper industry dropped about 20% between 2005 and 2016, and this is continuing. And the industry overall now is responsible for only 0.5% of total U.S. CO2 emissions. That was back in 2016. It's probably less now. I'm just trying to get the latest stats. Sometimes they're not always up to date on the EPA website. So wood stores carbon indefinitely, even as a finished product. And this helps reduce the effects of greenhouse gas emissions in the long term. It's only when paper ends up in a landfill or gets burned that it releases CO2. So if it's a book on your shelf, or if it's paper that is being stored, that carbon is still stored in the product and not being released in the environment. Next slide. All right, this is an interesting topic for me because I've been dealing with it for the last 20 years. This idea that only recycled paper should be used to make new paper, and just the overall topic on how we make best use of recovered paper and recycled fiber. The bottom line is that we need wood from well-managed forests to make paper products. Recycled fibers are also great, but it all starts with wood. And if you eliminate that, the entire industry eventually shuts down. Without fresh wood, the production of paper ceases within 6 to 18 months, depending on the paper grade. And if we look at where the recycle is going, a lot of it is going into tissue, container boards, and other packaging or board products. 6% roughly goes into printing and writing grades. And the reason behind that is very much economic and environmental, and I'll talk about it on the next slide. The other important point is at least 15% of paper products are removed from a fiber cycle because they're one-time use products like tissues, sanitary products, medical supplies, and books or files that are archived for long periods of time. So every time we use fiber, we lose some because of these points. Next. So a few key bullets here on what to consider around the topic of recycled fiber. Our view is that both recycled and wood fiber from well-managed forests are very important raw materials, and one cannot exist without the other. Recycled should be used in the right locations and grades based on economic and environmental consequences. For example, if you are generating a lot of de-inked sludge, one of the more environmental solutions is to use it as a fuel. If you put it in a landfill site, that's not as desirable. So depending on the technologies available at mills, some of these scenarios may or may not be beneficial. De-inking, bleaching, and transportation are key factors to consider. In other words, when you're making what I call board products that may not need high levels of bleaching and whiteness, you don't necessarily have to de-ink, and then you're saving costs and environmental impacts when you don't do that. So that's just one example, and probably a key reason why a lot of recycled gets routed to board products, because it doesn't have to be cleaned at the same level, and that's lower costs and lower environmental impacts. Paper quality requirements may demand the use of fresh wood instead of de-ink pulp. And the one thing I think everybody can agree on is that paper recovery and recycling should always be promoted. So no matter where the recycled fiber is used, at the end, we always should recycle our paper and board products. Our consumer surveys over the years have shown that there's still a high preference for paper products depending on the type of product. Here are a few results from our latest survey, and this is linked to this fact or the myth that consumers prefer digital, but in fact we find that many consumers value paper-based communications. A very strong responses around choice. In other words, consumers want to retain a choice on how they receive information, whether it's printed or electronically. And that applies especially to things like bills and statements from service providers. 74% are concerned about security issues and privacy, the risk of being hacked, losing your personal information or having it, having your identity stolen, as an example. 73% keep hard copies because they believe that it's the safest and most secure way, and 65% like receiving bills and statements through a combination of online and paper. And then when it comes to financial management, 56% find it easier to manage their finances when printed on paper. When it comes to reading preferences, books are still doing quite well. 68% believe print is the most enjoyable way to read books, and these numbers have not changed much in the past few years. Magazines is at 65%, so this is basically print versus digital, and what people prefer to read. Newspapers are decreasing every time we do this survey, so they're now at 53%, but I think the previous survey was closer to 60. Newspapers are probably the most impacted due to a lot of people now consuming news online on their phones or iPads, tablets. So I have 3 kids who are either in school or have finished, and they have often used paper because it helps them learn and remember things. We've compiled a fact sheet on this topic, and a few of the points are summarized here. In general, print is seen as more informative, relaxing, less distracting, and less harmful to health than looking at a screen. Many parents want to read books to their kids because of the unique sensory and tactile experience it provides. And when it's a complicated subject, a lot of students say that they prefer reading it on paper rather than on the screen. And then there's a body of evidence also showing that when students are given the same information on screens versus print, that the ones that have read in print score better on tests than those who read text digitally. Next slide. And obviously, I don't have to convince this audience, but print is effective for advertising. People pay more attention to ads in print versus online. In fact, 54% are more likely to take action after seeing an ad in print versus the same ad online. And the next slide, I encourage you to go to this website. It's called Print Power. It's a European site, but what Print Power has done over many years is compiled case studies, and these are case studies from major brand names on why print has been a powerful medium for them. It's a free site. You just go into Print Power, go to the case studies page, and it'll give you some great examples on how the major global brands have made use of print to promote their businesses. So that's, if you're looking for examples to show your customers, I highly suggest this one. Next slide. So over the years, I've come across some very interesting research articles. For example, SAPI has done some great work in this area on why the brain prefers print. So there's a reason we connect to print. And it's not just because it's print, it's because it triggers an emotional connection in our minds. There are neuroscientific studies that have shown that our brains have a stronger connection with print and paper related to digital screens. It's in part due to the sense, the touch and feel, the sense of place where we can locate printed words and pictures more easily than on a screen. And all this can really influence media choices and decision making. So I think print is far from dead. In fact, a lot of the companies that spent millions and millions in online advertising over the past decade are now realizing that some of that money may not have been well spent and are now redirecting that towards print. So in closing, I just had some key points. Print and paper has unique sustainable features. It's unmatched by most products. It comes from a renewable natural resource. It supports well-managed forests. It provides a more emotional and real connection than screens. It has great benefits for learning and literacy. It's still preferred as a communication channel by many, and it's less harmful to health than screen gazing, which is something we're probably all guilty of these days. And with that, I think I only have one more slide. It might be a quiz, but I don't know if your quiz is working. Oh, it's back. So let me know if you want to learn more about two sides. There's a typo in your title there, but if you do, I'm happy to send you more information or get in touch with you personally. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, doing the poll, we do have a couple of questions, Phil. The first one is, knowing that some paper items are not recycled, such as napkins, what is the goal for paper recovery per year?
I believe the AF&PA, which is the American Forest and Paper Association, has set a goal of at least 70% or maybe even 72%. I'll have to check the numbers, but they have a vision document. It's on the AF&PA website. It's really tough to get above 75%. There aren't many or any countries globally that get beyond 75%, just because we're losing paper with these one-time use products. Some of the European countries are 75%-ish, but beyond that, it's very challenging.
And what was that website?
AF&PA, American Forest and Paper Association.
Okay, I'm going to turn this off. And our second question, the question is, did I hear you say that American e-waste most often ends up impacting third world countries?
Yes. So e-waste gets shipped around the world and gets dismantled. Because there's still a lot of recyclables within a laptop, within a computer, and some of these end up in India, Africa, and other countries, and they get dismantled there, and people collect the waste and sell it. So there is a really interesting website on all this. It's called the Basel Action Network. So BAN, Basel as in BASEL, but the website is called ban.org, and they investigate this issue. Some countries have regulations that say you cannot export e-waste, and I don't think the U.S. has that. So it's going to change over the years. In other words, there will be regulations put in place saying that countries can no longer export electronic waste. The other things that's happening is some of these underdeveloped countries or the recipients of this are starting to turn it back. So if there's a shipload of e-waste showing up, they just say, no, we don't want to go back. So it's a really hot topic, and I think things are going to change pretty quickly around this.
And you said that website was ban.org?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, if anyone else has a question, you can go ahead and type it in. While we'll wait, I just want to remind everyone that IPMA will be hosting 2 roadshows before our conference. In June, we will be at Oregon State University, March 24th and 25th in Corvallis, Oregon. And April 21st, we will be going to the Kohler Company in Kohler, Wisconsin. So you can go to ipma.org and search for our road shows, and you can find that. Okay, well, Phil, there's such good information. I mean, I didn't know a lot of this, and I'm going to hit my college-age son over the head with a lot of this information. So opened my eyes on a lot of things, and so.
Well, as a quick review, there's a lot of stuff behind it, but I guess just let me know if you need more, and we can help people out and send them the sources or references if they need to get them.
Well, and we do have a question. Can we get a copy of the slideshow? Actually, yes. If you're an IPMA member, the recording of the of this webinar will be in the community, and we will, as soon as I get it uploaded, we will have both, actually the recording and the PowerPoint presentation available for you to download. You can watch it, you can download it, take it home, sleep with it. So,
Hey, Jen, why don't we go ahead and I'll send you over the NAPCO white paper, and you can include that into that list of downloads. And that way everybody that attended today can get access to it.
Oh, good. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I know everybody heard that, so that will also be in the community with instructions on how to get to it. If there aren't any more questions. Oh, I got to thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, God, yeah. You're also very welcome.
So, Phil, thank you so much.
Very welcome.
It's just been great. I just want to take a second to let everybody else know that we do have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks, February 26th, Trends in Color Management and How to Hit the Target. For all other information, I encourage you to go to ipma.org, and I just want to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day. If you're in the path of this winter storm, stay safe and enjoy your day. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.